Boker Tov.
Boker Tov.
This is a different kind of day for religious school, a different day in our year, a special day, a day where we remember those who died in the time of the Shoah, in the Holocaust. So this is Yom HaShoah. So we begin with silence in memory of those millions of our own people and other people who died during that time. So just take a moment of silence in the room. We begin with silence, the silence of death, the silence after destruction. There are times when songs falter, when darkness fills life. There are no words to reach beyond the edge of night, no messenger to tell the full tale. There is only silence, the silence of 6 million. 6 million murders. One murder 6 million times. The silence of memory. Let us remember them as we link our silences all together. So especially today, in memory, we stand for the call to worship, the Baruch. We ask to be awake and present in this moment of memory. We remain standing for these words, the Shema, which, according to our tradition, these are the last words we say in our lives. We say them every night, but we say them one last time. So many of those millions went to their death with these very words on their lips. So we sing the Shema together.
Shema.
Oh
Rabbi Leo Beck was a rabbi there in Europe during this time, and he wrote these words: "We would assemble in the darkness. To light a candle there, or even a match, would have brought immediate disaster upon us. We spoke of matters of the spirit and eternal questions about God, about Jews in the world, about the eternity of the people Israel. In the midst of the darkness, I sensed light in the unlit room, the light of Torah." And so today we light candles because we're free and because we're able to. We light candles because that's what we Jews do in memory of people that we've loved and lost. And so we have hundreds of candles up here. Each one represents thousands of lives today. And so we're going to ask everyone here to light a candle. So we're going to come up row by row. So I invite you to be seated. And then we'll bring up some of our teachers, and perhaps Madrechim are going to help with guiding the lighting. And as we sing songs of memory, perhaps even of hope, we'll go row by row. And so I'll tell you when it's time to come up and light. So we're going to start with your row. Okay. So you can come up to this side. Light. You guys can come up and light a candle.
Merar.
The poem Ellie, Ellie was composed by Naomi Shemer, who left her home in the land of Israel to save Jews in Europe during the Holocaust. And Naomi Shemer also wrote the poem known as Yesh Kochavim, the next song we'll sing together. We honor her memory and all of her brothers and sisters who perished.
There are stars up above, so far away we only see the light. Long, long after the star itself is gone. And so it is with people that we love. Them
We're now going to sing a really, really beautiful song. This is called The Last Butterfly. And if we can kind of find our shalom, find our calm and our quiet. The words of this poem were written by a 14-year-old boy named Pavel Friedman. And Pavel perished in the concentration camp Theresen at the age of 14. And what's remarkable about this poem is even in the tragedy and the pain and the hardship, Pavel was able to see the beauty in God's creation. And so as we look at the beauty of our candles and the strength of our community, I think we can find some inspiration from this beautiful poem, The Last Butterfly.
The last, the very last, so richly, brightly, dazzling yellow. Perhaps if the sun's tears could sing against the white stone.
Let's try that again.
The last, the very last, so richly, brightly, dazzling yellow. Perhaps if the sun's tears could sing against the white stone. Such a yellow is carried lightly way up high. It went away, I'm sure, because it kissed the world goodbye. The last, the very last, so richly, brightly, dazzling yellow. Perhaps if the sun's tears could sing against the white stone. For 7 weeks I lived here, pent up inside this ghetto. But I have found my people here. The dandelions hold to me, and the white chestnut candles in the woods. Only I have never seen another butterfly. The last, the very last, so richly, brightly, dazzling yellow. Perhaps if the sun's tears could sing against the white stone. The last, the very last, so richly, brightly, dazzling yellow. Perhaps if the sun's tears could sing against the white stone. The butterfly was the last one. Butterflies don't live in here.
We ask all of you to stand as we sing an ancient prayer from our tradition, the El Maleh Rachamim, the prayer for the immortal soul, the gift that God gives to each of us when we're born. It has a special form on Yom HaShoah as we remember not one life as we usually do at a funeral, but 6 million lives.
El Maleh Rachamim. תצא מנוחה נכונה, תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים, את נשמות 6,000,000 אחינו ואחיותינו שנהרגו על קדוש השם בעל הרחמים, יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור מצרור החיים את נשמתם. אדוני הוא נחלתם, וינוחו בשלום על משכבם,
Fully compassionate God on high, to our 6 million brothers and sisters murdered because they were Jews, grant clear and certain rest with you in the lofty heights of the sacred and pure, whose brightness shines like the very glow of heaven. Source of mercy, forever enfold them in the embrace of your wings. Secure their souls in eternity. Adonai, they are yours. They will rest in peace. Amen.
Amen.
We remain standing for the Kaddish Yatom, the mourner's Kaddish, in memory of those whose names we know, in memory of so many whose names we don't know. We say these words. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, v'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'yizman kariv imru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevarach le'alam olme olmaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei dekudasha brichu, le'elo min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nehemata, damiran bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehei Shlomo Rabba min Shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Will you be seated?
This last song is a message from the past. A wonderful teaching that comes from our Jewish ancestors in Europe. Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav taught these words, Kol ha'olam kulo gesher tzarmei, the whole world is a narrow bridge. Every step, every day in our lives takes us forward on God's plan. V'ha'ikar lo lefachet klal, and the most important thing that we can do as individuals when we're confronted with uncertainty or fear is to try and trust and to try and find strength within ourselves, within one another, and not to fear. So we'll sing these words as a reminder of our strength and of the hope within each of us.
Kol ha'olam kulo yeshet tzarmeu, yeshet tzarmeu, yeshet tzarmeu. Kol ha'olam yeshet tzarmeu, yeshet tzarmeu.
Before we go on with the next part of our program, our youngest students are returning to their classrooms, so the youngest students that are here in the room already. So if you're here with your parents, though, you can stay here with your parents. But if you're here in class, then let's start with third grade. So third grade, you can go back to your classrooms.
And we count the Omer?
Would you like to count the Omer? It's the 10th day.
Sure.
So we have 10 boxes of cereal up here on the bima. You can see them in the front because this is the 10th day of the 49 days that take us from Passover to Shavuot. So from the time of our freedom to the time of the revelation of the Torah. And we do this, as many of you know, with cereal boxes because this also talks about the grain harvest in ancient Israel. And so since there's grain in cereal, it's our way of doing this. And then at the end of 49 days, we give these boxes of cereal to food pantries in the northern suburbs here. A particularly important time to do this because as school starts to come to an end, students who usually have a free breakfast and lunch at school are food insecure over the summer. So we invite you to participate in the mitzvah. All of you who are here today, feel free to bring cereal over the next 5.5 weeks till we get to Shavuot.
הנני מוכן ומזומן לקיים מצוות עשה של הספירת העומר. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו על ספירת העומר.
Amen.
היום 10 יום שהם שבוע אחד ו3 ימים לעומר.
This is the 10th day of the Omer, a week and 3 days of the counting since the exodus from Egypt on our route to Revelation at Mount Sinai. And fourth grade, you can return to your classes. And again, if you're here with your parents, you can stay.
Do you need this anymore? Okay, so we'll just leave it here.
And fifth grade, again, if you're here with parents, of course you can stay, but otherwise you return to your classrooms. Is Jim gonna do the introduction?
As our students are moving out, I invite everyone to move forward. I know our speaker is, especially if you're in the back row and you're a student, please move forward. As everyone's getting settled, it's good to see everyone. It's always been my honor and to invite Holocaust survivors here to speak to our entire community. And hopefully we'll have some time at the end for some questions. But before, you have to have an introduction for the introduction. I'd like to introduce Jim Schuster. And he's going to introduce our speaker. Jim is a docent at the Holocaust Museum. He worked for many years at Carmel High School and is really a Holocaust scholar. Jim.
Well, thank you, and welcome to everybody who's here and those online as well. As we already have seen, this week we commemorate the HaShoah, the anniversary of the Holocaust, particularly timed to the Jewish uprising in the Warsaw Ghetto, which, as it happens, was 80 years ago this week. So it's kind of a big anniversary this time. If you do the math, particularly for some of the younger members of our audience, and think about that, that means that anybody who was alive and remembers this and is a survivor of this experience has to be well into their 80s or even their 90s. So we're very blessed to have one of those survivors with us. There are fewer and fewer of them for us to hear. It's a dwindling number. Ellie Merar will be joining us in just a moment. But she will share her experience, and we're just fortunate to have her with us today. At the end of this, she will take questions, so please, think about your questions and feel free to ask. The one other thing I would point out, and for those of you who are online, you missed this opportunity, but our breakfast this morning was a little bit different than sometimes. Just a brief explanation for those of you who are with us. We always, of course, have our lox and bagels spread, but today we had something a little special because you may have noticed that we had watermelon there, and that was by design because when she came to America, one of Ellie's favorite foods became watermelon. So that is why the watermelon in the spread today. And so the rest of her story, I'm not going to tell you, including her other favorite foods. You'll have to get that from her. But did want to at least explain that. And so at that point, I will introduce Ellie Merar and let her take it away from there.
Sometimes take a peek. Okay, thanks. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I am Ellie Merar, although my name, believe it or not, is Eleanor. That is what my parents named me. And I was born in a small town in Germany. As you notice, it's marked in red, Lauderecken. And that is close to the French border. And Alsace-Lorraine, which, as many of you know, after the War of 1817, the Franco-Prussian War, the Germans had it. After World War I, the Versailles Treaty said the Germans had to give it back, and Hitler then took it on his own as part of enlarging German soil. I was born in this town in Germany in 1926. My family is mother, father. I have a younger sister who's still alive. I had what's called a very normal childhood. I had friends, I played ball, I had a doll, and we didn't play football, we played soccer. I remember playing soccer, hitting the wall, and with my head hitting the ball back. So I learned a little bit about soccer. And we also played marbles, but a little different than the kids did here. Here, the marbles are glass. We made our own. What we did, we drew in the dirt a big circle, dug a hole, and with the mud, made our own marbles, water and mud. They held together, and they'd fall apart, and we'd make more marbles, but that was all part of the game. I had friends. Excuse me, I'm looking for the clicker. Did someone, here it is. I'm sorry. Here we are. Here's a picture of me living with my mom and dad. My father had a cigar store, And here you see my sister and myself sitting on the counter, and you see the pipes hanging on the wall. And he also had another job, which was a fee handler, which in English means a cattle dealer. This is someone who went to the farmers and said, I will take your cattle to slaughter. And of course, we had a barn, and we fattened up the cow so that when my dad took the cow to slaughter, it was heavier, because the more heavier, the more money you'd get. And often he would bring home with him a baby goat or lamb. Those were our pets, until they got fat enough for slaughter, and they were then replaced. So, and he had a motorcycle, and here we are sitting on the motorcycle in front of the store. In 1933, a decree was exacted to boycott Jewish businesses, which was then followed by laws of restriction and exclusion. My life seemed very normal till 4th grade. Here is a picture of my sister and myself. I think, where am I? The second row, and you notice we were always dressed alike because we were about the same size. And this was a wonderful kindergarten teacher, and in the back were children who helped. There were 60 children in the kindergarten, but it was a wonderful, kind, loving experience for me. Here's a picture of me in 1st grade. And in German, it says, my first day of school. I had a backpack made of leather. It lasted me all my school career, as long as I was there. And in my backpack, we didn't use paper and pencil. We used slate and a slate pencil. And hanging out of that backpack, you see the rag, that was my eraser. I also wore an apron to school because I wasn't supposed to get my school dress dirty. And that was my school dress. I got home and changed to a play dress. And here's a picture of me in 3rd grade. Now things began to change, especially for me. I was in 4th grade, 10 years old. The old teachers were forced to discriminate against me because I was Jewish. The wrong-thinking, quote-unquote, teachers were purged from school, and the Nazi teachers appeared. This is my 5th grade picture, and this is the gentleman who took over the Nazi themes. I now sat in the back of the room. I wasn't called on anymore. Nobody played with me anymore. Now I began to appreciate my sister, no more sibling rivalry. Now, gym was also different. In 1936, the Olympics were held in Germany, and the Germans mimicked all the things that were done in the Olympics. In gym, I was pitted against the tallest girl in school. Why? Because I was to lose. Wasn't said out loud, it was implied. Jews are not athletic. Look at this. She lost. During the Olympics, Jesse Owens was an American, son of a sharecropper who won 4 gold Olympic medals. Hitler made it his idea was he would go down and shake hands with every gold medal winner, but he didn't go down and shake Jesse Owens' hand because he was a black man. Now here's a black man who won 4 gold medals, just like every other winner. He wouldn't go down. I also had an interesting experience of learning a subject called raciology. You've never heard of it? It has no scientific bearing, but you'll soon figure it out. On the board was the word Aryan and Jew. The Aryan is tall, the Jew is short. Here I am, an example of it. The Aryan has blue eyes, the Jew has black eyes. Here I am, another perfect example. The Jew has dark hair, and the Aryan is blonde. I'm another perfect example. The Aryan has a straight nose, the Jew had a hooked nose. Well, I don't need to say more about that, but I went home every night and rubbed my nose, hoping, please, please, don't let me have a hooked nose. Well, when you're 10 years old, you hope, but of course, your nose takes its shape the way it's going to grow. I walked home. Thank goodness I had a sister. They threw stones after me. Dogs chased after me. I was treated with contempt. When you go to school and hear the teachers say, let's hear what the Jew has to say, you think twice, because no matter what answer I would give, it wasn't adequate. It was also always a remark, a retort. So, of course, I wasn't called anymore. And when you're not called on, you feel very insecure because you feel as though whatever I say isn't going to be accepted. In the morning, it used to be Guten Morgen, now it was Heil Hitler. And Jews were not to say Heil Hitler. Here I am again in a predicament. I'd go like this, go this way. I quite didn't know how to handle myself. That also makes you feel so unsure and insecure what was going on. Whenever you met your teacher, it was the same thing. I would hide behind a tree trying to avoid the incident. Because the town wasn't that big, you would often run into your teacher. I wasn't allowed to go to movies anymore. The classroom had about 50 children, and discipline was kept with a switch. His hand behind his back, he had a switch about this long, and he'd whip it through the air so you could hear it, let you know, you better behave, because the switch will take care of everything. The girls got hit in the hand, the boys in the legs, and when you went home and complained, the first thing your parents would probably say, well, what did you do to deserve? You must have deserved it. Parents certainly didn't come to school to complain. Teachers were in charge of the classroom. Children were also lined up in classroom by abilities. The A's, in Germany, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A's, B's, C's, and the Jew corner. So I was also separated from the children by sitting in the Jew corner. Everybody belonged to the Hitler Youth. Of course, I didn't. I wasn't allowed. And when you're 10 years old, you don't want to be different. You want to be part of the group. Well, that wasn't allowed for me. And the children were told by their Hitler Youth leader that if any of the parents had any contact with any Jew, the children were to report it to the leader, and their parents would be dealt with accordingly. Now, just stop to think what predicament those children were put in. They also taught a class, the class of raciology was stressed indirectly. Here I am, the only Jewish child in that classroom who fitted exactly the picture of what Hitler said Jews should look like. So therefore, Hitler is right, I'm the Jew who they don't want, making Germany Judenrein. And the children were taught really how to hate. The Nazis used these tactics: stereotyping, which means conforming to a standard. I didn't conform to their standard. Discrimination. I couldn't participate. I was different. I was a Jew. Scapegoating. It's all your fault. Is it my fault I was born a Jew? Humiliating. You're not as good as the rest of us. Well, I'm not as capable. They're showing to all the other kids I'm not as capable. And the hard part is always being in suspense, never knowing what will happen to you from minute to minute. It makes you feel so insecure, not knowing you couldn't predict anything. I had a stomach ache all the time. Dehumanizing, I was treated like the animals. They threw stones after me. They chased them after me. And being in isolation, nobody played with me as though I didn't exist. I vanished into thin air. In 1936, the Nazis enacted a decree that Jewish children could no longer attend public school. Well, for whatever reason, there was no Jewish school nearby. It was quite a distance away. So for whatever reason, both of us were able to stay. Life now became much more miserable and unbearable for me. I had an aunt and uncle in France, and remember, we lived close to Alsace-Lorraine, so he was a Frenchman. My aunt, this is after World War I, married a Frenchman, lived in France, and I had visited them frequently. And my parents thought it's a good idea to send her to France. She won't complain of that stomach ache every morning, which my mother always said, it'll go away. Well, it never went away. So I go to France. I live in France with them. I go to French school. I speak no French. I was given French books. I didn't even know how to pronounce the French language. But I went along. There were songs on the board. I copied everything. I was there for about 6 months. And by the way, they spoke German to me at home. So I wasn't even encased in French at home. But there I am in school. At any rate, one day I come home and my aunt says, we're going to have to send you back home. Well, the reason was France was building the Maginot Line. Now, the Maginot Line was sort of a buttress, and bunkers were built because the French were afraid the Germans were going to invade. So my aunt and uncle thought, well, it's best to get her home with her family. My aunt had a daughter who went to a parochial, because my uncle was Catholic, went to a parochial private school. She had enough and wanted me to be with my family. I got home and was told that no one sold them food anymore. Nobody came to the business anymore because there's a Nazi standing outside the door, taking down everybody's name. So who's going to buy? Who's going to come? And when my father went to the farmers to collect his commission, he was told, oh, we don't pay Jews. They're all rich. You don't need the money. Well, we certainly did need the money because we had no source of income now anymore. So what were my parents to do? Well, first they thought the kinder transport, and we didn't qualify because we had relatives in America. And then they thought maybe to Palestine, but as my father, I remember him saying, there is no Hebrew word for toothbrush. It's a brand new language. He didn't want to do that. So my mother had a sister here in Terre Haute in America and pleaded with them, please, we can't make it anymore. We didn't hear from them. We didn't hear from them. Other letters went, and finally figured out that they didn't quite believe what was going on in a country like Germany, where everyone was educated, many scientists, many professionals, everyone was educated. How could this happen in such an educated country that they would allow a dictator to take over? At any rate, after much pleading, They gave us information. They would sponsor us. In those days, when you sponsored a family. Food, clothing, shelter, medical care. There were no green cards. The government did nothing. So it was also the height of the Depression. I remember my parents going and buying food with a bushel basket full of money. And things were not much better here. So this was another reason I suspect they were reluctant to send us. At any rate, we sold the house, pennies on the dollar, whatever we would get. We didn't have a lift because we couldn't afford to bring our furniture. We brought household possessions and things of that sort we took with us. And my father, here's another thing. When we had to go to the American consulate in Stuttgart, and when you go there, you get a physical, you get interrogated, why do you want to come? And all of the questions that were asked. My father was in World War I and had severe war wounds. Now, you know, he fought on the German side. And severe war wounds, he lost an eye. He could only open up his mouth this way, many nerve damage. And he had a wallet that he carried in his pocket that a bullet went through. You could see where the wallet stopped the bullet. He had a wound that you could put at least a kid's fist in. So he was very concerned because if you are ill, they wouldn't take you. America didn't need people who were dependent, couldn't support themselves once they got here. We left Germany, and very few people came to say goodbye. A friend of my father's, who was not a Nazi, said to him, I wish I could go with you, but I can't. I have no one who would want me. So that was another side of the Germans, but a small side of it. We took an American ship because my father said, I'm not about to leave money in Germany and take a German ship. That was not, they've got everything I have. So we took the USS Washington and left on the 13th of July in 1937 from Hamburg. Then we stopped in Le Havre to pick up passengers, and then to Southampton in England, Cobb in Ireland, and came to America 9 days later. Now, what does it take, 9 hours? But I will tell you that it was one of my most delightful experiences after what I had gone through. This is on the right. There's a boy standing there between my sister and myself. We didn't go out to restaurants to eat much in Germany, and here I am in a dining room with a menu in front of me, and I could eat whatever, I could choose what I wanted, which was a delight. And the food was American food. And one of the things, there were food on there that I had never tasted before. And one of the things was corn on the cob. In Europe, corn on the cob is fed to the animals. And wow, this is sweet stuff. Humans should eat this too, I think. And the other was watermelon. That was quite something. And in those days, they had the pits in them. You know, now you can buy them without the pits. And at any rate, watermelon was delicious, and I still love watermelon. So those were the good times I had. We arrived in New York, and everyone that was an immigrant was to be escorted with someone who knew them. And everybody on the boat was gone, but we were still in the stateroom. My father opened the door, and there's an immigration officer standing outside the door. Oh, my parents blanched. He didn't speak German. My dad and mother didn't speak English. So it turns out that an uncle forgot to pick us up. Another member of the family picked us up, and we stayed overnight at the Washington Hotel. I came on the USS Washington. I stayed at the at the hotel in Washington. In Terre Haute, I lived on Washington Street. And believe it or not, when I taught school in Evanston at Washington School. So George and I are good friends. Oh. We came to Terre Haute. That's where my aunt lived. And my aunt had notified the superintendent, and on the kitchen table were copies of Dick and Jane. We were told, speak English all the time. My aunt and uncle, who could speak German, did not. I was to be Americanized as quickly as possible. We were given an IQ test in English, and they thought we knew something because telephone and elephant are the same in German as in English. 2 words isn't very much, but it's a start. At any rate, the superintendent knew these 2 girls were coming. After all, Terre Haute had no refugees. It wasn't as though we had gone to New York, where there were many, and my parents and I probably wouldn't have to learn English. But in Terre Haute, we did, and they were very much insistent on it. I had play dates. I was taught that I now needed to learn how to play baseball. So they give me a stick and throw this little ball at me. Oh my. And I'm thinking, why isn't the ball bigger? I might hit it. Well, that's what you do when you're a kid, you know. At any rate, I still don't know how to bat, but I know something about baseball. My parents assumed, without much saying, that we needed an education. And we needed an education because everything was taken away from us, anything material, but what's in your head can never be taken away. And it didn't need to be said. My sister and I knew full well that's what it was. We were there during the war. We came to Chicago immediately after my parents became citizens, and it takes 5 years, and during the war, World War II, the Americans had a dire need for workers, but you could work in the war factories if you were a citizen. So my father came to Chicago, found a job, and, in a war factory, and we then moved to Chicago, and all of us got war jobs and worked in factories to help further the war. I would like to tell everyone, especially the children, that I have a message for you. That we live in a country that gives us the opportunity to make choices. We must speak out against bigotry, injustice, and bullying. Speak out. Silence means complicity. There was no one there to speak out for us. Freedom of the press. Hitler told you how to vote, how to think, even how to eat, because every Friday night was a one-pot dinner, like a stew or whatever, but that was everybody, and everybody followed it. The Nazis only printed what they wanted you to read. America, we have choices. And you have to be, and a democracy needs an educated citizenry. We have to be able to make decisions that are the best for ourselves and our country, and stay informed. Informed citizens are very necessary in a democracy. And read a variety of newspapers, books, and get all the information so that you can make a good decision. And of course, voting. Every vote counts. That's the only way that you can make yourself as one person's idea count. You know, people say only one vote. One becomes two, and so on, and pretty soon there are many more votes. And speaking out takes really a lot of guts. If someone is being bullied on the playground, and you watch it and you know it's wrong, it takes a lot of guts and courage to be the first one to speak out. But sometimes being the first one brings many who didn't quite have the courage that you have as a person speaking out. They follow because they see how important it is. And for the very last thing, I would like to read to you a poem. I think some of you know it. It's called Confession of Guilt. This was written by Pastor Merar. First, they came for the communists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. And I tell you my story so that it won't become your future. Thank you for listening. I'll answer every question as best I can. And again, when I'm at the museum and I speak to the children, I say there are no dumb questions.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure we have a few questions. Cantor Jay, do we have another microphone? All right, we're trying to find that. So I think how we'll work it now is you raise your hand, I'll repeat the question. God willing, I can hear your question. And then Ellie can answer. So questions. And until we get the microphone, you have to be really loud, even if you're an adult. Oh, Mr. Valentine. How old were you when you left in 1937?
When I talk to the kids, I tell them I have a math and a question for you. I was born in 1926, 11 years old.
Jeff. How many other Jewish families were in your town?
Okay, we were the only children. There was another family there that had an adult son. My father had a cousin, and my grandmother lived with us. So that's about it.
I see a special question from your granddaughter. What happened to your relatives?
My relatives, they were taken to camps and disappeared.
Okay, I see someone in the back. You're going to have to be really super loud. Go ahead.
How long did it take you until you found out about what was going on in Germany with the violence?
Good question. How long did it take you to find out about what was happening in Germany?
Well, I'll tell you, I then lived in America. The camps, the killing camps weren't opened until much later after we left. So I found out just like everybody else did in America. The only thing is this, my parents subscribed to a German Jewish newspaper from New York, and somehow New York had more information, and they did mention something was going on, but the details, no. Not until it was known throughout.
We have a question there, and Jim's going to come get it, but I have a quick question.
Sure.
Do you still speak German?
Very, very poorly.
When you were in 5th grade, did you understand what was happening?
Repeat that, would you?
When you were in 5th grade, did you understand what was happening?
I understood what was happening to me, that I didn't have friends, I was alone. They didn't like me because I was a Jew. But I have to tell you, I knew that I was a Jew. My mother was religious. Because there was no synagogue, she came from a very Orthodox background, and every Shabbos, Friday night, we had a service. She did the service. On Saturdays, I remember the white tablecloth, and she sat down with us and taught us how to read Hebrew and taught us a night prayer. We said Omer every year. We did all the things that she wanted us to learn.
Len, and then in the front.
And follow up on your comment, how did you, when you were a child, how did you celebrate the high holidays if you were the only family in the town?
Well, the other synagogue was within, everybody walked, you know, in my days. There were some people very rich who had cars. My father wouldn't go near the motorcycle on the high holidays, and we walked a couple of hours to the other synagogue in the other town. And you know, when I was little, towns were close to each other, some within walking distance and some much further.
So I have a question for you. I wanted to get your opinion on current events. How concerned do you think we should be about books being banned in places like Florida, and also events that have happened in recent times like neo-Nazis marching in Charlottesville?
Well, I see much of it as a repeat, what I lived through. I feel you have to speak out, you have to stand up, do what you can. I see things happening now. I don't know how to prevent it from happening, but I want it not to happen. I want this country to be free so that everyone can say, and the other thing I often think of, how long have democracies in the history of the world lasted? The Greeks, going all the way back. What are we, 250 years? I think that's a pretty old democracy. I hope it continues.
Did we have another question?
So when you were being discriminated against as a child in school, did you ever wish you weren't Jewish?
Well, did I ever wish? I'll tell you what I wished. I often did not acknowledge my Jewishness. Even to this day, I don't speak out to others. I'm a Jew. If the conversation leads to it, yes, but still in my head and heart, those feelings have never left me. They're with me all the time. Or if somebody says something that's anti-Semitic, I cringe. If I'm with a group and someone, I do say, speak out. But again, I always, if somebody says something, I always say, you shouldn't say that. We're Jews. We can't say that. I suspect some of you feel the same way.
Please forgive the comment. I was also born in 1926. And so the parallel experiences are so striking for me. Growing up Jewish on the west side of Chicago, there were 120,000 of us.
Yes.
We were totally sheltered, though we knew of anti-Semitism in the United States, and in some places it was quite severe, but we knew nothing of it because we were so secure. But then we had the privilege of being able to join the military during World War II, and I was in the Navy just as a very young man. But I just kept thinking of the parallels of, we both had the same experiences. Incidentally, I ended up teaching as well. But it was in such a sheltered experience. The only other comment I'd like to make is we really didn't know what was going on, of course, but we had glimmers of it. I remember as a child dreaming of Hitler crossing the waters to come to harm us. But we didn't really know, as everybody understands, till much later how horrible it was. But thank you, this was a wonderful, wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Bernie, for your comments. I think, oh, go ahead, Ellie.
Yeah. I wanted to tell you, my husband lived on the west side, and he lived near in an Italian neighborhood. And he also felt anti-Semitism on the west side.
You've given us a lot to think about today. And I say to the adults and the students, Ellie has told us to vote. Ellie has told us to have our voice heard.
Yes.
I hope I don't cry. But also, Macomb, Salil, Lakeside, we are going to have another refugee family come. And this is our way in 2023 to make sure that people have, you know, what we have. And to all the students, you live in a great place where you can eat food and you have a house and you get to come here and study. And so you have to make the most of that and make the most of at your public school as well. So I think we're going to let Ellie rest here a second. I saw Ashley. Ashley, do you want kids, where do you want our students to go? Okay. Okay, all right. So I want to thank everybody, and we thank Ellie and Jim, and
Thank you. Yes.
it's great. So, you know, hopeful. Okay.